The morning my mother uninvited me from Thanksgiving, I was breaking down butternut squash. It was 6 a.m., and my kitchen was already running. We had 218 individual meals going out by noon, a corporate catering order, our biggest holiday push of the year, and I was on the prep line, because that is where I am most mornings. Regardless of what my title says on the paperwork, the smell of brown butter was already coming up from the back burner. Someone had a playlist going low. It was a good morning, or it was becoming one. My phone lit up at 7:14. I saw my mother's name and dried my hands before I picked it up, the way you do when you expect the call to require your full attention. It was a text, not a call. 11 words. "We think it's best you sit this one out, sweetheart. Colton has some colleagues joining us this year, and we just want everything to feel polished." I read it twice. I set the phone face down on the stainless steel prep table and went back to the squash. I want to be precise about this. I was 34 years old. I had not missed a family Thanksgiving in 6 years. And my mother had just told me, in 11 words, that my presence was a problem to be managed. I didn't call her back, not because I had nothing to say, but because by then, I already knew what that Thursday was going to look like. I just hadn't decided yet whether to warn her. The story my family told about me had been building for 12 years, and by the time they'd finished with it, I barely recognized myself in it. I moved to Chicago at 22 for culinary school. My parents told people I'd gone to work at a restaurant. That was technically true, the way it's technically true that a surgeon works in a building. The word did a specific kind of work for them. It kept expectations tidy, kept the conversations short, kept me in a particular drawer they knew how to close. I stopped correcting them around 26. That was the year I made sous chef, which felt significant to me, and I made the mistake of mentioning it at Easter dinner. My mother looked up from her plate and said, "Well, at least you're good at it." Not unkindly. That was almost worse. After that, the silence became a habit I maintained for both of us. Meanwhile, Colton's life was narrated in real time. The 2019 Christmas card referenced his VP promotion in the caption. I was cropped out of the photo they used that year. I noticed, and I let it go, because some things cost more to argue than to absorb. Once, I mentioned a catering contract at Sunday dinner, $80,000, a new corporate client. 30 seconds later, my mother had pivoted to Colton's new car lease. I counted the seconds, because I was curious how long it would take. The version of me they'd built was useful to them. It made Colton look taller. I'd understood that for years. What I hadn't understood until October was how fragile that version actually was. The call came 3 weeks before Thanksgiving, and it came to Renata first, a production team representing Doug Faulconer's program, a national food and lifestyle show, the kind that airs on the channel my mother watches every Sunday morning, with her second cup of coffee, wanted me for a Thanksgiving segment. Live to tape in their Chicago studio. Biographical intro package. A short cooking demonstration. It would air at 2 p.m. Central on Thanksgiving Day. I said yes within the hour. The original plan was simple. Tape the segment in the morning. Drive to Ohio after. Arrive late to dinner. A 4-hour drive. I'd done it before on less sleep. Renata thought the timing was funny, in the way that things are funny before they become something else. She looked at me across the prep counter and said, "Your family watches that channel every Sunday. Your mother is basically their target demographic." I acknowledged this. I did not act on it. I wrote the segment date in my calendar and went back to work. The disinvitation text arrived 2 weeks later, 11 words on a Tuesday morning, and it reordered everything without changing anything. The segment was already booked. The drive to Ohio was already cancelled, just for a different reason now. I didn't call Doug Faulconer's team. I didn't cancel. I didn't send my mother a link or a hint or a single syllable of warning. I want to be clear about that part. I did not arrange for them to see it. I did not send a link, drop a hint, or say a single word. Some things arrange themselves. I found out about the contract on a Wednesday, which is traditionally my quietest day, and I remember thinking that was either very good timing or very bad timing, depending on how you looked at it. Renata handles the vendor side of our group, the corporate accounts, the renewal cycles, the paperwork that keeps 3 locations running without anyone noticing the machinery. She flagged it almost by accident, cross-referencing a subsidiary name against our active client list. Colton's firm was our largest single corporate catering account. Had been for 14 months, $340,000 annually, paid reliably, on a contract that ran through a subsidiary name different enough from Colton's employer that neither of us had ever connected them. Colton, as far as we could determine, had never seen the vendor paperwork. There was no reason he would have. I sat with this information for 4 days. I didn't call Colton. I didn't mention it to my parents. I turned it over, the way you turn over something fragile, checking the weight of it, deciding what it was. On the 5th day, I asked Renata one question. Does the renewal come up before or after Thanksgiving? She checked. After. I nodded and didn't say anything else. And she had the good sense not to ask me to. Thanksgiving Eve, I made a simple meal in my apartment, packed my kit for the morning, and was in bed by 10. I slept 7 hours straight. I have never, in my adult life, slept 7 hours the night before Thanksgiving. I took that as information. I arrived at the studio at 7:45 a.m. with my knife roll and a flat of butternut squash I'd brought from the restaurant. Because I don't trust unfamiliar produce, and I wasn't about to start on national television. Doug Falconer was already there, which I respected. He shook my hand, offered coffee, and spent 10 minutes asking genuine questions about the restaurant group. Not the surface version, the real one. How we'd structured the 3 locations. What the James Beard process actually felt like from the inside. He'd done his research, which meant his team had done theirs. Before we taped, they walked me through the intro package, on a monitor in the green room. 47 seconds. My name, my age, the group's 3 locations listed by neighborhood, the James Beard semi-finalist recognition from 11 months prior, a slow pan across our dining room, on a full Friday night, my restaurant's logo visible and clear, the kind of segment introduction that leaves nothing ambiguous about what a person has built. I watched it, and felt something I can only describe as proportionate. Not pride exactly, more like accuracy, like a measurement that finally matched the thing being measured. We taped at 11:30. I made the brown butter squash the same preparation I'd been breaking down the morning the text arrived. I didn't mention that on air. It wasn't relevant to anyone but me. The segment aired at 2:03 p.m. By then, I was already in my car, heading nowhere in particular, radio off. I found out what happened in my parents' living room, the same way I find out most things about my family. From Aunt Pauline. Approximately 19 minutes after the fact, Pauline's text arrived at 2:22 p.m. and contained 3 sentences. Mara, I am watching you on television right now, in your parents' living room, where you were told not to come. She'd punctuated the first 3 and left the last one open, which told me everything I needed to know about her state of mind. What followed came in pieces. The way Pauline tells things chronological, precise. With editorial asides, she can't help herself from adding. There were 9 family members in that living room. 2 of them were Colton's colleagues, there to experience the polished Thanksgiving my mother had curated. Doug Falconer's intro package ran for 47 seconds before anyone spoke. My name, my neighborhoods, my award recognition, my dining room on a full Friday night, all of it moving across the screen, while the green bean casserole sat cooling on the table. Colton said, according to Pauline, I didn't know it was that big. His colleague, the one seated closest to the television, said, Wait, that's the place that does our office lunches. Then silence. Pauline described it as the specific kind of silence that has a shape. I read all of this parked off. 90. Engine running. Heat on. My mother called at 2:31, 2:44, and 3:45. I watched all 3 calls go to voicemail and felt nothing I would classify as satisfaction. It was quieter than that. More like watching a door close that had been open for 12 years. I responded to Pauline at 3:46 with 2 words. Good squash. My mother called 3 times between 2:22 and 3:45. I know the exact count, because Pauline texted me the play-by-play of every attempt, with commentary. Diane called a 4th time on the Sunday after Thanksgiving. I answered. The conversation was 8 minutes long. She said she hadn't realized the scale of things, that she wished she'd known, that she hoped I understood it was never about not being proud of me. I listened to all of it. When she finished, I didn't fill the silence with reassurance the way I had for 12 years running. I let it sit there between us, taking up the space it had always deserved. It was the first time in my adult life I'd done that. It felt like setting down something heavy. Colton emailed 2 days later, not personally through the restaurant group's public contact form. A formal inquiry about continuing the catering relationship, going forward. I forwarded it to Renata, without a word. She responded professionally, as she does everything. The contract renewed on standard terms in December. I didn't leverage it. I didn't need to. The truth had already done the only work that mattered. Gerald called once, somewhere in between. He said, "Your mother feels terrible." I said, "I know, Dad." That was the whole conversation. The following Saturday, I was back in the restaurant, where I am most Saturdays, working the line and checking the reservation book. A table of 4 came in under the name Voss, booked for 7:30. I saw it. I didn't cancel it, didn't move it, didn't give it a second look. They came in on time. I sent out an extra course, the brown butter squash. No note. I figured they'd understand, or they wouldn't. Either way, the food was good.